Medical workers of Reddit, what were the most haunting last words you've heard from a patient? A teenage girl, who was having an asthma attack, while she was at someone's house she wasn't supposed to be at. My mom's gonna kill me. She died at the hospital. The reason why I always take my inhaler. I'm an emergency nurse, and there's one thing that always gets me when patients die. Not what they say, but what their husband/wife/parents say when they've gone. I've had it a few times, but the most memorable was a man in his 70s whose wife had just passed away, and he was holding her hand and crying, and he just looked up at me and said, "I've loved her for 55 years, she's my whole life. What do I do without her?" It breaks me every time. ICU nurse here. I relate to this so much. Had a patient in her 30s who was dying after being hit by a drunk driver. Her husband was at the bedside repeating, "What do I do? What do I do?" while crying. They had already lost their baby girl in the accident. Every healthcare worker who entered that room was deeply affected by that. It was awful. Sweet guy in his 20s with endocarditis, heart valve infection, caused by 4 drug abuse. I was prepping him for his 3rd open heart surgery when he sat up, looked me in the eye, and said, "I'm going to die, aren't I?" He did not survive the surgery. Damn, this one hit me hard. Addiction is such a bitch. I had that job from 2006 to 2016, and we went from a handful of endocarditis patients under 30 per year, to 2 to 3 per week as the opioid epidemic grew. Even if they got clean and sober, the damage was done. It was heartbreaking. My husband is a PICU nurse, and one morning he came home in a bit of a daze. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me about a little boy who had been in PICU for a few days already and wasn't getting better. Most nights, the little boy would wake up, so one of the nurses would keep him company while he fell asleep again. My husband was doing just that. He read him a book, then just sat there with the boy listening to music so he would go back to sleep. Before falling asleep, the little boy said, "You were my favorite." The boy passed away in the morning. His little heart gave out and refused to restart. Although all patients are important, some leave more of an impression than others. Until that point, that little boy hadn't stood out to my husband, and he felt terrible about it because, clearly, he had made a big impression on that little boy. That was the only patient's funeral he has ever attended. Edit. Thank you so much everyone for your amazing replies. I have passed along your love and gratitude to my husband. Actually read him some comments and he blushed and got all bashful. Thank you to those who gave this comment silver, golds and platinum. Since my husband did not receive this prizes, I went and bought him a PSN card so he can spend on his games and made him his favorite for dinner. You were my favorite. Well shit, I'd be crying myself to sleep for a week. Nurse, in hospital caring for 40-ish man with brain tumor, coming in and out of consciousness. Not to be resuscitated. His 16-year-old daughter was crying non-stop for 12 hours. His wife, who had been given a few months to prepare herself, was calm and focused on her husband. I had to routinely check his level of consciousness, which involved talking to him in a loud voice, responds to auditory stimulation, which I did not like to do. So I asked his wife to do the loud voice part, so the voice he would hear would be hers, not mine, and she did so without hesitation. The only response we observed with her vocalization was that this by now profoundly unconscious patient took her hand to his lips and kissed it. He stopped breathing very soon after that. I am haunted, but not in a bad way. My grandpa was similar, struggling to hang on but not responsive. My grandma grabbed his hand and said, "It's okay, you can go, the kids will take care of me." He was gone within the hour. He loved her so much that it wasn't a surprise that he needed her permission to die. Thank you for sharing such a sad and lovely story. When I was a senior resident, a young man, late 20s, was admitted for pneumonia. He got worse quickly and I was called to his room to help while on call that night. He was having trouble breathing and needed intubated. I explained all this to him and that I would sedate him and then get him intubated so we could help him breathe. He agreed and we got everything ready. The last thing he said to me was, "Doc, please don't let me die." I told him I would do my very best. I got him intubated and transferred to the ICU. A few weeks later I was on call covering the ICU and he was barely hanging on. I knew he would not make it through the night. He went into VFib several times and I was able to bring him back, but only briefly. He was just too sick and he died shortly after that. It was horrible talking to his mother and girlfriend and comforting them, knowing the last words he ever spoke were to me saying, "Please don't let me die." On the other hand, you were true to your word, you did your best and didn't let him die. Death had to fight you for it. I've been a medic for 20 years. I have helped countless patients survive, and far too many that didn't, to the point of questioning my own sanity. Your single comment has just made one of the most profound changes in my own life. This is absolutely the best way I've ever heard it described. I used to feel like I was a failure or didn't do enough if the PT didn't pull through. Now, I see it was a knockdown drag-out battle for their life. It wasn't words, but the most haunting death was a patient who was DNR, through her and her family's wishes. She was losing her battle, and her family wasn't there. She was getting frantic and looking around and half sitting up in bed, and a nurse with more experience than me, took her hand and calmly said, "It's okay. You're not alone. We're right here with you, it's okay to leave." The patient immediately calmed, put her head back on the pillow and died. I knew I wanted to be that nurse when I grew up. How the hell did she know just what to do and say? I've never forgotten it. My mom passed away a couple of hours after I told her I'd be okay and that it's okay for her to go. I've always hoped that I was able to give her the peace of mind she needed to let go. This is a common occurrence. I'm a tech in a hospital, I've seen this before. Patients pick their moment, often. The first I ever saw as a professional was a guy who said he was scared to die alone when he was lucid. He was DNR, me and my coworkers held his hand for the first 3 hours of my shift, taking turns. His family finally showed up at about 2 a.m., his wife, and adopted daughters were there. They went in, and he was dead in 10 minutes. He was waiting for his family to go. He died at 98, with the people he loved, in a warm, comfortable drug bed. We gave him drugs for anxiety and pain, so it was as peaceful as could be. He had a really good death. When I was 13, my grandfather had a heart attack. He hung around for 36 hours. He hung around for the whole family to show up, and then promptly died. Dude was always a fan of having an audience. More recently, I had a guy in his 60s with lung cancer. He was a DNR. His wife said, "Honey, if tonight is the night, that's okay, I understand, I love you and I always will." He gave a thumbs up, smiled, and died 10 minutes later. As a healthcare worker, I firmly believe you helped soothe her at the end. I think of it like falling asleep. You say, "Hey, it's okay, I got it from here," and then they can relax and let it go. Edit. Aw, thanks for gold. Nursing home. Most elderly people are at ease as they get nearer and nearer to death. But this old lady, as she deteriorated over her last week or so, would scream, "I don't want to die." Really heartbreaking to see. Oh no, this is so sad. I feel like this as well when I think about my, hopefully far into the future, natural death. I think what really makes it scary is all the trivial shit doesn't matter when you're facing death. Dishes, the lawn, picking up hot, etc. After reading this thread, I think I am just going to go home tonight, not complain about anything, and watch Bubble Guppies with my daughter even though I hate that damn show. With wide eyes, don't listen to my family, they want to keep me around forever but I just want to die. They won't let me. Edit. She wanted to get off dialysis, which was a death sentence for her. My mom and I cared for my grandmother in her final months. We were at her house pretty much every day, cleaning her up, feeding her, helping her to the restroom, and keeping her company. My grandfather was and is still alive, but he's a shit. We had already done our crying and mourning, and were ready to let her go when the time came. When she was clinging to life in the hospital, my aunt and uncles came out of the woodworks. The doctor asked if they should resuscitate and they all emphatically said yes, to do whatever it takes to keep her alive. Basically they were guilty about not having come around until her final moments, and wanted to drag out her misery to make themselves feel better. My mom and I put our foot down. That's not what Grandma wanted, and it sure as hell wasn't what she deserved. It was a fight but we won in the end and she was able to go without a fight when it was time. People can be real selfish assholes. I was visiting my grandpa and had to leave town and go back to medical school, and I told him I loved him and would see him later. He told me he loved me too, but no I wouldn't. He was right, he died a week later of pneumonia. My great-grandma told us something similar to this. We went to Mexico for her birthday. When we were saying our goodbyes, she told us the next time we'd be in town would be when she was 6 feet under. She was right. My grandmother started saying that to me when she turned 70. She died at 96. Hospice nurse here had a patient who was experiencing terminal agitation. With an expression of complete terror on his face he said, "Help me. They are coming to get me." Oh fuck, oh fuck. That scares me on such a deeply and fundamentally primitive level. For all of our bravado, none of us has any idea what lies beyond our last breath. I watched my best friend die of cancer. Through the whole thing, he was brave as shit, comforting all of us while he wasted away on treatment after treatment failed. I remember thinking he was 10x the man I could ever be. Then, in his last couple days, reality hit him hard. He was absolutely terrified, begging and pleading with everybody to help him, that he was dying and he was scared. He went from arguing with his doctors on an academic level to literally begging them to save his life. Nothing has fucked with me as hard as that did. That guy was stronger than I can ever hope to be, and his last moments were absolute terror, horror, and agony. Selfishly, all I can think is, what hope do I have of passing with dignity? Can I smoke in here? We were on an ambulance. Not sure if that's haunting, but I laughed my ass off. Politeness in death. Slow clap.